before. Set to go? Okay. Hello, this is Alex Howard from O'Reilly Media. We're here at the almost to the close of the Open Government Partnership Annual Meeting in Brasilia. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. I hope you'll stick around for the live stream of the actual closing plenary. With me I have Ginny Hunt, who works at Google and their public sector team. I've gotten to know her in D.C. in the context of Google Politics and Elections, where you all have now taken a data-driven approach to helping us understand what's happening in our primaries, which are now done, so we'll go on to see the presidential now. Here, though, you were talking about something a little bit different, and it is in the capacity of someone in the private sector talking about what you can do with public sector data. Is that correct?
Correct. And part of what we talked about in our panel was looking at the role that the public sector plays into the open government and open data movement generally. You know, a large part of what OGP and Open Government Partnership has focused on in the last 2 days has really been a policy framework and a set of policy levers and political levers that can be used to push for an open government agenda. And a portion of what we talked about in our session was, what does that look like from a technology and information perspective? What is a framework for really looking at how we can develop platforms, standards, and a holistic operating system, if you will, to ensure that the policy levers that are really pushing for an open government agenda can be implemented effectively across technology platforms.
Now, Google is famously quite a technology-driven company and a data-driven company. One of the undercurrents here, without any question, was the role of technology and data in open government. While I think there's a real tension between traditional transparency and accountability advocates and this new wave of civic hackers, of people who are working with technology to open up government, there's a lot of commonality too. One particular area of interest is in this area of standards, which is to say that if the same standard for data is used across cities, across states, across countries, then people can develop against it, something we've seen to be quite important in the context of the internet. What are the most important standards that you're seeing in the public sector right now that people should know about?
Well, I think one of the best examples that we reference is the transit standard. And what's interesting is that now 476 cities across the world have been able to really gain economies of scale by using a common transit standard to be able to publish real-time transit information that gets now in the hands of millions of daily users across devices who are looking for, when their public bus is coming, if their train is delayed. And what it's meant, sort of the bigger picture story, is that it means that there can actually really be a better system overall from a transit authority perspective, from a technology perspective, and most importantly for citizens who need to be sure that they can get to work on time or get to a doctor's appointment on time and have trust in their public transit system. So I think one of the bigger things we talked about, though, is that we have a lack of standards or widely adopted standards around a lot of essential pieces of open government information. And a comment from one of the audience participants was really a call for more convening around that topic.
And that's something government can do, is convene around standards.
Okay. And OGP can do that as well.
So let me just help people understand this if they're not familiar with the idea here. So there's a standard by which data is released. I think with Google it's the Google Transit Feed Specification, GTFS.
Yes.
So if a city transit agency releases its data in this standard, it's then used by various different services. So when someone goes to something like Google Maps and then types in directions, it pulls that data and then displays on the route where the nearest bus or train is?
Correct.
Okay. What lesson can we learn from that and applied elsewhere?
Well, I think one lesson we can learn is, first, understand where people are looking for your information. So, for example, restaurants. Oftentimes when people are looking for restaurants, it's a good opportunity to inform them about health inspection information. So part of a lesson I think we can learn from the transit model is reach users where they're looking for transit information. We happen to be one place. There are thousands of places where people are looking for transit information. The fastest way for you to make sure that the thousands of places where people are looking for transit information have your authoritative transit information is by using a common standard and distributing that information in an open way that's well documented, so that any developer then can take that information and put it in the hands of people seeking out transit information, education information, health stats and standards. So that, I think that's one of the primary lessons from the transit perspective, and that it really required a partnership and a broad community. So no, even if it had only been Google and a government, we wouldn't have seen the real sort of viral growth of the openness of transit information had it only been the two of us alone. So I think an open process, an open system, and an open standard allowed for that.
So it's a really interesting conversation to see this idea of finding citizens where they are, as opposed to trying to share information for where you want them to be.
Right.
And I can see there's the push-pull discussion here. And it's come up several times in the context of portals versus platforms. You use the word platform here. We see portal in a number of the open government plans. Can you describe the difference and what it means?
It's interesting. I think one thing that I've learned from the last 2 days is that we can probably put too much meaning in a certain vocabulary. And I think one of the most important things is really focusing on functionality, and also, as we've talked about, sort of outcomes and metrics. So what that would mean is, where are citizens and your constituents looking for your information? One way that you can understand that is, what are people doing when they come to your website, which you might call a portal? And if you're helping them find that easily, that's great. They're also looking across other platforms to find that information. Some people go to search engines, for example. Some people go to news organizations. I think that we can get caught up in our own definitions, but I think what's important is focusing, as you said, on where the user is, not trying to always pull them to you, but push information to them.
I think that's one of the reasons, at least, that many governments have joined social networks.
Right. Absolutely.
They're on Facebook and Twitter, and now, of course, a couple on Google Plus too, which makes you all happy. So to this point, though, of finding people where they are, and making the information relevant and useful to them in that context, right? So it's not just the real-time web; it's the right-time web. I get it when I need it, where I need it. You work at Google. You consume and crawl tremendous amounts of information. There are many governments here who are interested in making that information more readily available to their citizens. They're very hopeful that they'll be able to get more transparency and accountability through that, more civic utility, and in many cases this great promise of economic opportunity, prosperity, as the representatives from the British government have put it. What are the ways that government should be thinking about releasing its data to make it more useful to all the different private sector companies that are increasingly acting as the means by which people get information about their worlds?
Right. Well, I think one starting point is to begin to engage the startup community and entrepreneurs in the very early stages of determining and prioritizing what information you make available and how. I think one of the missing links here, even as we've talked about sort of the traditional sectors, is we haven't talked about entrepreneurs that cut across those. And I think they are the real catalyst, whether they be in the public sector, private sector, or civil society, in really driving and igniting large impact projects around the use of public information. So one is, I think, engaging entrepreneurs and startups early in the conversation. Second is, of course, using best practices around machine readable information, making sure that whether it's a portal or a platform, that you're publishing information in ways that are easily crawlable, accessible, and readable by machines, largely. And I think thirdly, using feedback mechanisms. I think one of the things we find a lot is that people publish and then don't necessarily follow and understand that publishing a data set is the first step in a long process to making public systems usable. So in a digital age.
So as you look at this conference, you've been here for nearly 2 days with me, seeing this happen, and you've gone through some of the internet issues that I did too yesterday, challenge for both of us. Happily, we are both online. What are some of the big takeaways? And we'll think this will be the last question because I know that we'll be having the final plenary soon.
Okay. I think a few takeaways. One, if you see how far this initiative has come in just about 8 months, the number of countries here who, at very high levels, are committed to and embracing the notions of openness and the fundamental principles around openness, and not just embracing, but actually prescribing action plans, working with civil society, working with private sector to see how they can develop and really succeed at deploying those action plans, I think has been remarkable. You can probably speak more broadly from a perspective of the technology community and DC and other perspectives in the policy community, but I think it's frankly remarkable that this many people and this many differences of geography, access have come together around a common purpose. So that's one big takeaway. I think the second is that I think we all agree on the fundamental concepts, but we really have a lot of work to do on, again, the technology principles and platforms and a real operating system to make sure that the ideals can be put into practice effectively and are sustainable.
That's a great place to leave it. I will say we could also learn from the talks from Libyan Deputy Prime Minister and the Tunisian Secretary of State this morning that culture is a huge issue, and that open government, as much as it is born and enabled by the technology, will be ultimately about people.
Absolutely.
And hopefully those people being empowered by the tools that they're now have access to. So thank you so much, Ginny Hunt. So it's Ginny Hunt from Google. You can follow her at Ginny Hunt, or you can circle her if that's your thing too. Thank you so much for tuning in. As I said earlier, there's going to be a final plenary, so I hope you'll stick around. It should be some excellent comments and great wrap-up of the conference. And I believe the transparency hackers are going to present upon the application they've been hacking on for the past couple of days. So there should be an opportunity to see what they've been up to as well. So thank you very much.